Hello, welcome to the latest Adrax Agatone video. I hope everybody's doing well. Apologies for the slight delay in some videos coming out. I've been up north for the last few days, a couple of photo shoots as well. So I am back now, and let's just quickly have a look. So we're going to do the flame today. We kind of touched a little bit on the OSL as well, but we'll do a little bit more of that once we've got the head done as well, because we're going to have some of the glow is going to be hitting the head as well. But if we very quickly just go through the colours on the wet palette, from top left, we've got Corvus Black, Citadel Corvus Black, then Mephiston Red and Evil Sun Scarlet. The orange one is a game colour Orange Fire, which you can kind of mix with Uriel Yellow and Evil Sun Scarlet if you want to. The yellow underneath those is Phalanx Yellow, and then it's Vallejo Ivory, which you can see I am doing now. Now the Vallejo Ivory is pretty much just for the very hot spots. Now the way fire and braziers like this work, when you're painting them at least, is that they need to be very hot in the center, so that the center and the depths of the center need to be very bright, and then the further away from the center you go, the darker red, and then eventually you get like little wisps of smoke towards the end. So the tips of the flames that are coming out of this brazier, not brazier, the tips of the flames that are coming out of the brazier are going to be black and smoky, which is what the Corvus Black is there for. We'll just kind of glaze a little bit of Corvus Black into it. So we've already started off, and I've got the ivory into the hot spots, into the center, and this is now Mephiston Red, and I'm pretty much just kind of sloshing this all over the center of the flame. I want, because the cloak, which is perfectly timed because I've just turned it around, because the cloak is predominantly red, I want to make the flame a little bit brighter, so it has a little bit more contrast towards the cloak. So the predominant colour of the flame is going to be orange. So we're going to that's the reason why I'm kind of getting Mephiston Red as prominently over the flame as I can, because then it will cover very well when I get the orange on there. So yeah, this is just kind of being sloshed on. It is an old size 1 brush. You can see it's already splitting and kind of messing around, but it's perfect for kind of base colours and base coating like this. The paints on the wet palette are they have 1 drop of water on each of them. And then, like I have been painting for the last few as well, the wet palette is incredibly wet as well. So it is drawing the water up through the paint very quickly, and thinning it out. And you'll see that every time I pick the paint up from the wet palette as well, I'm dragging it out and allowing it to absorb even more water before I take it to the model. So yeah, this is the first bit of the orange. Again, we want it to predominantly orange around here. So I'm just kind of scrubbing on and getting a nice blend between the red and the orange. The orange isn't the most opaque paint, so it's usually the way with oranges and yellows. They're not particularly opaque. So you have to work them up in layers. You'll see we work up a fair few layers on this one. We're only going to work on the front of the flame. I do the back of the flame to match as well, but you'll see that in a later video when it's all finished. But it's pretty much just the same process that we're going through. So you can see it covers over the black reasonably well. A couple of coats and it'll be absolutely fine. But you can see how much of the flame I want to try to keep this orange, just to brighten it up and make it look differently from the cloak. The cloak is predominantly red. If you remember when we were doing that one, we were trying to keep it away from the orange and the yellows. So on this one, I want to try and keep it away from the reds if I can. So the further down this path that we go, then you'll see the more orange and yellows that we get on there. This brush is absolutely shot. It needs a clean. It's probably got a little bit too much paint up in the ferrule, which is causing these causing the bristles to split a little bit. If you do end up with a brush like that, just get some brush cleaner, swash it around a little bit, twist it on the palm of your hand once you've got it full of brush cleaner, and you should be able to get a lot of the paint residue out of the ferrule. So we in the centre of the brazier. We've just dropping a little bit of red in there to give it a hint of the colour that we want it to be, and also it will help when we're getting the yellow in there as well, just to help the yellow cover a little bit better. Now, because this is going to be a very, very bright flame in the centre as well, the actual metal of the brazier, that's going to be very, very dark. And that will also give us space and room to actually do some little bits of OSL and kissing the edges of the brazier with reds and yellows to try to sell the flaming glow a little bit more. There won't be too much OSL on this because obviously he's standing in daylight, so his armor is all bright and highlighted already. If he was standing in dark. If you were standing in darkness and you were painting him as if he was standing in darkness, then pretty much the whole top side of him would be OSL orange and reds to show that he's got flame nearby. But because it's daylight, the flame isn't going to be able to overpower the daylight too much, so we're just going to almost just tint a few of the highlights on the backpack and on the top of the head and things like that, just to go a little bit more towards the red. So you can see as we're kind of building up these layers, the ivory has been is starting to be covered up a little bit with the yellow. That was always going to be the case. The ivory is reserved for the very, very depths, and also to give a very good kind of base tone that you can build the yellow up on very, very well, and the yellow builds up on the orange very well as well. So. Now when we get out into the flames, it's a little bit of artistic license because it's very difficult to paint the centre of a sculpted flame, because if you remember we were making sure that the brazier was very bright in the centre, and then the further it went out, the more reds and yellows came into it. So the further away from the centre, excuse me. But when you're painting a flame, it applies exactly the same. So the center of the flame would be bright, and then the outside of the flame would be going towards the oranges and the reds. However, if you're painting a sculpted flame, you can't paint the center of it because the center of it is solid. So the way you do that is you pick an edge, and you follow that edge across the whole side. So we're doing the very, very outside edge here, and we're making sure that the outside edge of this is the brightest, and that's just it's just a little bit of artistic license to, and it tends to look rather good when you've done it like that. So the depths start looking a little bit darker and smoky, and then the flames come out in yellows and oranges right at the edge, so it's almost like an edge highlight but not quite, sort of thing. But it still needs to make sure that overall you are leaning towards a brighter centre, towards the brazier, towards the centre of the brazier. So all this here, all this yellow is the centre of the hot part of the flame in here, and the further away from that you go, it darkens down and gets a bit more smoky. But the artistic license of being able to just edge highlight a little bit and give the flame a little bit of texture and shape, it always works well. Anyway, so we're just adding in a little bit more hot points right down at the bottom. That ivory is a very, very good. It's a warm ivory, is a very warm white, so it's perfect for this sort of thing because it plays in very well with that. So quick change. So we've done the predominant kind of colour blends now. So we're going to quickly change to a size 0 brush. just so we can start getting some textures and some sharper lines in there. Again, it's not a very new brush. We're still kind of scribbling and scrubbing a little bit, keeping the randomness and the texture on the flames as well. Again, once you've finished this, I do actually right at the end. I do it off camera actually, but right at the end I do give it a very quick glaze of orange just to pull a few of the textures away and smooth it out a little bit. So you'll see that in one of the final photos that I'll put up on a separate post. I won't have time, unfortunately, to photograph this model at the end of the video, but I'll make sure I photograph it tomorrow and put it up as a post so you can see. So keeping it hot towards the centre, and then you can see we're fading that yellow out as we go around and paint the edges. And there are little like nodules and little bumps around the flames as well, so you can make sure you can paint those as little hot spots as well. So that little yellow hot spot there that you can see on the blob, if you like, in the flame, just represents like a little swirl of heat as it's going around. So this is the edge highlighter which we were talking about. So it's very difficult to paint the center of a flame, so just pick an edge, so that all these edges which are facing forwards, they're going to be effectively brighter than the rest of the flame, to give it some shape again, to give it some dimension, but always making sure that we have that little bit of smoke towards the end. So we're never going to paint the tip red. The tip is always going to stay that kind of corvus black. Yeah. Again, another little hotspot, but because that one's further away, that hotspot's going to be orange rather than the yellow that we added on the one that was slightly closer towards the centre, towards the hot point. Towards the hot point sounds like I'm talking about a cooker. Very, very kind of fine little red edge highlight down there. And now what I'm doing is I'm looking at all the colours and trying to find the transitions between them, which are a little bit rough. Again, the orange isn't the best at being a strong mark, so it does give a bit of an opaque finish. Sorry, a bit of a translucent finish. So I'm just trying to find where those where the edges are, and just adding a little bit. I do apologise. Has been a long day. Just adding a little bit of colour and transition, and to smooth out the marks, the brush marks. So just it's basically, this is just going back, very, very similar to how we did with the armour. We're just going back between the oranges and the reds and the yellows, and finding little hot spots where the blend isn't quite so smooth, like this bit here. So we're just adding some orange into the centre, and then grabbing some yellow again and going in and trying to add more hot spots here and there. Again, if you think there should be a hotspot, then just add that hotspot in. It's very much a rule of cool when you're painting flames like this. It's other than you need to have a hot point. The hottest point needs to be towards the center of the flame and the source of the flame. Other than that, you just make sure that it looks cool. And obviously, the further away that you go, it should start getting darker. But if you want to add little hot spots into the depths of the flame in there to give it some dimension, that's all cool. So when we do the OSL and the little glow that's hitting the metal of the brazier, that OSL will start to be, it will never be yellow. The OSL on that will never be yellow. It will always be either orange or red, depending on how close it is to the flame. So the OSL on the brazier will probably be like an orange, and then as we get further away from it, so when we start hitting the head and the backpack and things, they will start to be red. I do start the highlight on the backpack with an orange, but kind of pull in a little bit of red as well, and just start changing the colours a little bit. Now it's a bit difficult to see here, but what I'm doing is pulling, when I'm getting the paint off the palette, I'm pulling it across the palette to absorb a little bit more water. So this is quite a thin layer to try to pull and soften some of the marks off. That was what we were doing there, and now we're going back in with this orange and trying to add those hot spots again on the bulbous edges and the little hot spots that you see in the flame. This bit was causing me particular problems. I couldn't decide whether I wanted that all yellow or all orange, or like orange and then with yellow edge highlights and things like that. So I kind of go between the two. I end up keeping the center of this orange and having it as an edge highlight of yellow, but yeah, I couldn't quite decide on that. So yeah, you can just see us softening in a little bit of orange on there, pulling all this together, and little hot spots again. But these hot spots as well, they help change the tone of the flame, away from the red and towards the orange. So don't be, if you are doing this and trying to match, don't be afraid of adding plenty of those kind of orange hot spots. It's the same as the cloak. When we were painting the cloak is predominantly very, very, very dark browny red, but because it's got some very strong highlights on it, it actually looks red, and flaming red. So yeah, if you can be very strong and prominent with the highlights, you can change the colour of this. So that's why I'm being a little bit more free with the orange highlights, because some of them are getting quite far down towards the end of the flame, but that's like a little bit of artistic license to keep the flame looking orange. Now we're on here with the yellow, just kind of smoothing some of the points out, touching some highlights, touching some hot spots. My fist on yellow, so right down at the end, just adding a tiny little bit of edge highlights, keeping that red. The very end started looking a little bit too dark for me, which is why I kind of went back in with that mephiston. There was a bit too much smoke towards the end of this. But we do start going back in with the Corvus now and just pulling some of this Corvus black in. This is just to keep the contrast nice and high on the brazier, and then the tips of some of the flames, the paint has started just rubbing off a little bit. So that's another really good use for the Corvus black, just to add that paint back in again. And yeah, we're glazing some of this Corvus black into the depths just to add a little bit of a smoky feel. It adds a bit of contrast as well, but then also the smoke, it gives the smoke towards the end of the flame, it gives it a reason to be there, sort of thing. So if you're adding the smoke into some of the depths, so that bit there that we've added, and also the bottom of the large flame, it started going a little bit darker and smokier, just to add it in a little bit. Sorry, I'm out of focus a little bit there. So that's pretty much how the flame is going to sit there and look. Now as we're adding the OSL, what we're going to do, we started a little bit here, but this is just going to be the principle of it. So the highlight that you see on the top of the backpack, that green highlight, it's still going to be that sort of strength, because we're trying to allow the flame to compete with the sunlight, but it's not going to be any bigger. It's not going to we're not going to cover half the body, half the backpack and half the shoulder pad with a flaming OSL. It's just going to be concentrated on some of the already highlighted areas. So you're almost tinting the highlights with some reds and some oranges here. And this is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to do the head next, and then once we've got the head done, we can start adding in some proper OSL for the backpack and the top of the head and things like that. But there we go. The flame, the back of the flame is exactly the same. We're just adding a little bit of Corvus black into the recesses here, just to give it some contrast when we get it nice and bright. But the back is done in exactly the same manner, and there we go. We have a nice flame for the back of Adrax Agatone. So thank you very much, guys, for hanging out and watching this one. I hope you've learnt plenty. Remember, when you're doing flames, keep the hot spot in towards the centre of the source of the flame, and then the further away you go, the darker the red gets, through yellows, oranges, reds, and then the tips always be nice and smoky. Right, I will see you again for the next one. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves and stay safe. Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.